The Alien Symposium on Human Biology. The city of Xenovos floated in the vast darkness of space, a shining beacon of science and progress in the Andromeda Galaxy. Built upon a colossal asteroid, it was home to the most advanced minds from countless civilizations. Biologists, physicists, and geneticists from across the universe had gathered for the most anticipated event of the decade, the Intergalactic Symposium on Xenobiology. This year's focus was on a species that had long puzzled the scientific community: humans. Inside the grand conference hall, the atmosphere hummed with curiosity and excitement. Beings of all shapes and sizes filled the vast auditorium, some floating in their anti-gravity chambers, others seated in fluid-filled tanks to accommodate their aquatic nature. In the center of the room stood a massive holographic display, its shimmering light casting eerie reflections on the polished obsidian walls. At the podium, Dr. Korek, a towering insectoid scholar from the planet Zektal, clicked his mandibles as he addressed the audience. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice buzzing through the translator, "we are here to discuss a species that defies logic, challenges biology, and contradicts everything we know about survival, humans from the planet Earth." The crowd murmured in intrigue. Even the oldest scholars of the Galactic Scientific Coalition had never been able to fully understand the peculiarities of human biology. Dr. Korak gestured toward the hologram, and a 3D image of a human appeared, rotating slowly. Despite their fragile appearance, humans exhibit an absurd level of endurance. They are not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most intelligent species we have encountered, yet they persist. They thrive in conditions that should destroy them. A tentacled being raised a limb. "Doctor, if I may interrupt, surely their homeworld must be a place of great stability to foster such persistence." Dr. Korak let out a chittering laugh, tapping at his control panel to bring up a new image. A glowing orb appeared, Earth, surrounded by shifting weather patterns, violent storms, and natural disasters. "This is their homeworld," he said, "a planet plagued by unpredictable weather, extreme climates, constant geological upheaval, and an atmosphere filled with microbes that should have wiped them out long ago." Gasps rippled through the audience. For many species, stability was the foundation of survival. To hear that humans had evolved on such a chaotic world was inconceivable. And yet, Dr. Korak continued, "Not only do they survive, but they dominate. Their biology is not particularly advanced. No exoskeletons, no natural armor, no biological weaponry, yet they continue to adapt and overcome. Why?" At that moment, another scientist stepped forward. Dr. Verath, a crystalline entity whose entire body pulsed with light, took the podium. "Allow me to elaborate," Dr. Verath said, their voice resonating like chimes. "The most fascinating aspect of human biology is not merely their endurance, but their ability to recover from injury. I present to you a case study. Lieutenant David Carter, a human soldier who survived injuries that should have been fatal." The hologram changed, showing an image of a battle-scarred man, his body riddled with wounds, yet standing defiantly. Lieutenant Carter suffered a punctured lung, shattered ribs, and severe blood loss. Any other species would have perished. Yet within weeks, his body healed itself. No cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, just sheer biological resilience. A murmur of disbelief spread through the room. A reptilian scientist clicked his claws together. "That is absurd. Our species requires regenerative chambers for such injuries." Dr. Verath nodded. "Indeed, but humans possess a remarkable cellular regeneration process, allowing them to repair damage faster than most species of their size. Their bodies even produce additional layers of scar tissue as reinforcement. It is crude, but effective." Another scientist, a floating mass of energy, hummed in contemplation. "And their pain tolerance? Do they not suffer greatly from such injuries?" Dr. Verath's form pulsed brighter. "They do. And yet, they continue to fight through it. Their ability to endure pain and push beyond their biological limits is unparalleled. The audience sat in stunned silence. Finally, Dr. Korak took the podium again. And this is only the beginning. Human biology is filled with mysteries, some of which even they do not fully understand. Their immune system alone is a subject of great intrigue, fending off countless pathogens with remarkable adaptability. Their metabolic efficiency allows them to extract energy from a wide variety of organic matter. And most bizarrely, he paused, as if to let the anticipation build. They can force their bodies to become stronger through repeated damage. They call it exercise. The room erupted in debate. To many species, damage was something to be avoided. The idea of intentionally harming one's own muscles so they would regrow stronger was beyond comprehension. Dr. Korak let the noise settle before delivering his final words. "My colleagues, we stand on the precipice of discovery. If we can unlock the secrets of human biology, we may uncover new methods of survival for all species. But be warned, humans are unpredictable. The more we study them, the more we realize how little we understand." As the symposium continued, one question lingered in the minds of every scientist present. What was it that truly made humans so ridiculously resilient? And more importantly, the limits of human endurance. The murmurs of debate still echoed through the grand halls of the Xenovos Symposium. Scientists from across the galaxy were deep in discussion, their disbelief evident as they analyzed the astonishing case studies presented in Part 1. The idea that a species so biologically unremarkable could be so durable defied logic. But the mysteries of human endurance were far from fully explored. Dr. Xelen, a biophysicist from the high-gravity world of Torvax, took the stage next. His thick, armored exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights, and his 6 muscular arms moved with precise gestures as he activated the next holographic display. "I have studied the physiology of hundreds of species," Dr. Xelen began, his deep, gravelly voice amplified by the room's translation system. "Strength, agility, resilience. Every species has a limit. But humans, they redefine what we understand about limits." The holographic display shifted, revealing footage captured from a distant battlefield. A lone human soldier, Private Liam Vasquez, was seen crouched behind debris as plasma bolts streaked past him. His breathing was erratic, his body covered in burns and lacerations. His left leg had taken direct shrapnel damage, yet he remained upright. The audience gasped as the soldier pressed his trembling hands against his wounds, his body racked with pain. And then something extraordinary happened. Against all odds, he forced himself to move. With sheer determination, Private Vasquez limped forward, dragging his wounded leg behind him. His hands trembled as he lifted his weapon. His body was failing, yet his mind refused to surrender. He should not have been able to continue, Dr. Xelen stated, his 6 arms folding. Yet he did. This is a phenomenon we call adrenaline override. It allows humans to push past their biological limits when faced with extreme circumstances. Dr. Xelen zoomed in on the soldier's vitals, highlighting rapid fluctuations in heart rate, oxygen consumption, and hormone levels. "This is not just mental resilience," he continued. "Their bodies have a built-in emergency system. When placed under severe stress, their endocrine system floods their bloodstream with chemicals that enhance reaction time, dull pain, and temporarily increase strength. They can function at peak efficiency even while suffering catastrophic injuries." A scientist from the aquatic world of Fories raised a gelatinous limb. "But that is dangerous, is it not? To override one's own limitations could lead to self-destruction." Dr. Xelen nodded. "Indeed. The cost of this ability is immense. The human body is not designed to sustain such extreme conditions for long. Prolonged use of this emergency system results in cellular damage, organ failure, and in many cases, death. And yet," he gestured toward the next set of data, "humans continue to use it, despite the risks." The room was silent as the realization set in. Most species operated within clear biological boundaries. Their limits were their limits, unchangeable, absolute. But humans were different. They didn't just endure pain. They embraced it. Dr. Xellen took a step back, and the next presenter approached the podium. Dr. Zirin, a pale, ethereal being from the low-gravity world of Silas, floated forward, her translucent skin glowing faintly. "Pain tolerance is one thing," she said, her voice like a whisper in the wind. "But what of their endurance? Their ability to persist beyond what should be possible?" The hologram shifted again, displaying footage of a human endurance athlete, Nathaniel Carter, a civilian ultramarathon runner. The image showed him traversing the scorching sands of the Kordak wastelands, a planet known for its relentless heat and lack of oxygen. He ran for 80 kilometers in an environment that should have killed him, Dr. Zirin stated, her glowing fingers moving through the data stream. Temperatures exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. The oxygen levels were barely 70% of what is considered safe for human respiration. His muscles were deteriorating. His hydration levels were near fatal. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in. And yet, he did not stop. The footage showed Carter collapsing at the finish line, his body completely spent. Medics rushed to his side, pumping fluids into his failing system. Dr. Zirin turned to the audience. He survived. Within a few weeks, he recovered. And do you know what he did next? A silence stretched across the room. He ran another race. The absurdity of the statement sent a ripple of disbelief through the crowd. A scientist with crystalline eyes leaned forward. But why? Why subject themselves to such torment? Dr. Zirin offered a rare smile. That, my friends, is the true mystery of humanity. They are not content with their limits. They do not accept weakness. They see pain not as a barrier, but as a challenge. A mechanical voice echoed from the back of the room. They evolve through suffering. All heads turned toward the speaker, Dr. Vorak, an AI intelligence from the cybernetic world of Mecha Prime. His robotic frame whirred as he processed his thoughts. In all my calculations, no other species follows such an illogical survival strategy. Most beings adapt over generations through genetic evolution. Humans, however, force their own bodies to evolve within a single lifetime. They tear their muscles so they regrow stronger. They starve themselves so they can withstand deprivation. They expose themselves to danger not out of necessity, but out of a deep, unrelenting desire to improve. He paused, scanning the gathered audience. They seek out suffering, Dr. Vorak concluded, and through it, they become stronger. The weight of the statement pressed down on the room like an invisible force. The very foundation of biological survival was being rewritten before their eyes. Dr. Korek, still seated at the back, exhaled through his mandibles. He had come to the symposium expecting to expand his knowledge. Instead, he found himself questioning everything he had ever believed about life itself. The discussion continued into the night, but one truth was clear. Humanity's endurance was not just physical, it was a state of mind. And if a species could defy its own limits at will, the psychology of defiance. The symposium hall had grown silent, save for the faint hum of the holographic displays and the occasional murmured debate between the gathered scientists. The data presented so far was overwhelming. Humans could endure beyond reason, override their pain responses, and push themselves past the limits of survival. But there was another question looming over the discussion. Why? What drove them to suffer, to risk their lives when logic dictated retreat? Why did they push forward even when the odds were stacked against them? It was time to explore the enigma of the human mind. Dr. Zephyra, the reptilian scientist from the desert world of Gorth, took center stage. Her scaled skin gleamed under the lights, her golden eyes flickering with curiosity. She had studied resilience in organisms her entire career, but nothing compared to what she had seen in humans. Their biology is impressive, she began, her tail curling thoughtfully. But I would argue that their most powerful trait is not their physical endurance, it is their mind. A new holographic projection flickered to life. It displayed the barren landscape of Karen 6, a mining colony on the edge of known space. The atmosphere was toxic, the terrain hostile, and the local wildlife relentless in its aggression. The image zoomed in on a small outpost, walls scorched from past attacks, makeshift barricades hastily assembled. In the middle of it all stood a lone human, Commander Elias Monroe. He was the last surviving officer, Dr. Zephyr explained. His team was outnumbered, his reinforcements were days away, and the enemy forces had already breached their outer defenses. The footage changed, showing Monroe moving with precise efficiency, organizing the last remaining miners and technicians, rationing supplies, setting traps. His posture betrayed no fear, only focus. Dr. Zephyr turned to the audience. He had every reason to surrender. Every calculation predicted his defeat, and yet he refused. The projection fast-forwarded, showing the attack as it unfolded. Alien warbands stormed the outpost, outnumbering the defenders 10-1. The battle raged for hours, the humans fighting with relentless determination. And against all odds they won. Dr. Zephyr gestured at the data displayed beside her. Logically speaking, this should have been impossible. They were starving, sleep-deprived, running on sheer willpower. And yet, Monroe's leadership turned a certain loss into victory. A low murmur rippled through the audience. A scientist from the insectoid race of quirks raised a limb. You believe this was purely psychological, that their defiance alone enabled them to win. Dr. Zephyr's slitted eyes gleamed. I believe defiance is the core of their being. It is not just a strategy. It is who they are. She changed the hologram once again, displaying a set of historical records. Images of human revolutions, resistance movements, and uprisings played in succession. Again and again, when faced with overwhelming forces, humanity did not yield. They fight when others surrender, Dr. Zephyr continued. They rebel even when failure is guaranteed. They refuse submission, even when submission is the logical choice. Dr. Vorak, the AI scientist, tilted his head, processing the new information. This is statistically irrational. Dr. Zephyr smirked. And yet, it works. The AI paused, analyzing thousands of years of human warfare and struggle. His mechanical eyes flickered. You are correct. Despite the high probability of failure, their defiance often leads to victory. Dr. Vorak turned toward the audience. If their physical biology allows them to survive against all odds, then their psychology allows them to win when defeat is certain. A ripple of unease spread through the gathered scientists. Most species had instinctual responses to danger, fight, flight, or submission. But humans had a fourth response. They refused to accept reality as it was. They changed it. The prisoner experiment. Dr. Zephyr continued. To truly understand the depths of human psychology, let me present one final case study, one that baffled researchers for years. The holographic display changed once more. This time, it showed a dark, damp prison cell. Inside sat a lone human, restrained by energy shackles, his body gaunt from starvation. His name was Captain Daniel Reese. Captured during a failed reconnaissance mission, Dr. Zephyr explained. Captain Reese was held prisoner by the warlords of Drazar 5, a species known for their brutal treatment of captives. The display shifted, showing snippets of surveillance footage. The guards attempting to break Reese, to force him into submission. They deprived him of food, of sleep, of light. They beat him, isolated him. And yet, in every piece of footage, his eyes remained sharp, calculating. They did everything to break him, Dr. Zephyr continued. But instead, he broke them. The audience watched as Reese, through sheer force of will, turned his captors against each other. He learned their language, whispered lies into their ears, sowed distrust among the guards. Within weeks, the prison was in chaos. By the time reinforcements arrived, Reese was not just free. He had orchestrated an entire uprising. Dr. Zephyr let the silence stretch before she spoke again. This is what truly makes humans remarkable. Not just their bodies, not just their pain tolerance, but their ability to resist, to endure, to turn every defeat into an opportunity. She stepped back from the podium. So I ask you, esteemed colleagues, if humans can suffer beyond their limits, defy logic with sheer will, and turn imprisonment into victory, then what else are they capable of? The room was silent. A scientist from the avian world of Vekos whispered, almost in awe, "Are they unstoppable?" Dr. Zephyr's golden eyes gleamed. "No," she said softly, "but they will never stop trying." The power of adaptation. The silence in the symposium hall stretched for a long moment after Dr. Zephyr's presentation. The assembled scientists, beings from across the galaxy, each accustomed to the unique strengths of their own species, struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Humans were not merely survivors. They were something else entirely. Their defiance was not reckless instinct, nor was it simply a refusal to yield. It was part of something deeper, an ability to change, to adapt, to evolve in ways that defied explanation. Dr. Vorak, the cybernetic scientist from Mecha-9, finally broke the silence. His artificial voice hummed through the chamber, his glowing optics flickering in deep calculation. "We have discussed their resilience, their defiance, but what of their adaptability?" The other scientists turned toward him. Dr. Vorak continued, "Most species have evolved within specific environmental parameters. A species that thrives in high-gravity worlds cannot function in low gravity. A race accustomed to arid deserts struggles in humid jungles." He gestured, and a new holographic display appeared. It showcased a series of images, humans in every imaginable environment. From the deep void of space to frozen tundras, from toxic swamps to scorching deserts. Humans, however, Dr. Vorak said, do not simply survive in new environments. They change themselves to conquer them. He pointed to the first case study, the Mars colonists. A projection of a red, barren landscape filled the air. Jagged canyons stretched across the planet's surface, dust storms swirling in the thin atmosphere. The image zoomed in, revealing domed settlements. "These are the first long-term human colonists on Mars," Dr. Vorak explained. "A planet with an atmosphere too thin to breathe, radiation exposure lethal to most species, and temperatures that would freeze most organic life in minutes." The image changed again, this time focusing on the colonists themselves. They did not evolve for Mars. And yet, within a single generation, they adapted to it. The scientists in the audience studied the data. It showed physiological changes in the colonists. Denser bone structures to counteract low gravity, changes in lung efficiency to process thinner oxygen levels, and even early signs of altered circadian rhythms that aligned with the Martian day cycle. Dr. Vorak continued, "What should have taken thousands of years of natural selection, humans accomplished in decades. Their technology accelerated their adaptation, but their minds and bodies adjusted at an unprecedented rate." A scientist from the amphibious world of Thassa raised a hand. "But these changes require technology, did they not? They didn't evolve naturally." Dr. Vorak's optics flickered. "Precisely. They did not need evolution to change. They changed themselves." A murmur of understanding spread through the hall. Most species relied on natural selection, slow, incremental adjustments over millennia. But humans did not wait. They engineered their own evolution. The survivors of Kessera-9. Dr. Vorak moved to the next case study. This time, the projection showed a desolate, ruined planet. The skies were dark with thick clouds, the surface ravaged by the aftermath of nuclear war. "This is Kessera-9, Dr. Vorak explained. "A world devastated by conflict, abandoned by the galactic community. Yet, when a human expedition crash-landed here, they did not perish." The projection shifted, showing human survivors moving through the wasteland, crafting makeshift settlements from wreckage, scavenging for food, developing new survival techniques. Dr. Vorak turned to the audience. In a matter of weeks, they had created filtration systems to purify toxic water. In months, they had converted abandoned facilities into shelters. And in less than a year, they had built a thriving settlement. Dr. Cable, the aquatic scientist, shook her head in disbelief. Other species would have perished within days. Dr. Vorak nodded. Precisely. But humans do not perish. They adapt. They find solutions where others see only death. The room remained quiet, absorbing the weight of his words. The Warborn. Evolution under fire. The final case study appeared on the holographic display. An ongoing war zone. Flashes of battle illuminated the screen, showing humans engaged in a desperate fight against an unknown alien force. These soldiers were deployed on Grathos 7, Dr. Vorak explained. A planet with gravity 2.5 times higher than Earth's, a hostile biosphere, and a constant state of warfare. The footage showed something extraordinary. At the beginning of the war, human soldiers struggled under the crushing gravity, their movements sluggish, their endurance compromised. But as the footage progressed over months, something changed. Their muscles became denser, their lung capacity increased. Their reactions sharpened. Dr. Vorak's optics glowed. Within a single year, human physiology had begun adjusting. Without genetic modification, without external assistance, their very bodies evolved in response to the conditions of war. A collective wave of shock spread through the audience. This, Dr. Vorak continued, is not normal evolution. This is adaptation at a level no other species exhibits. They do not wait for change. They become the change. The implications. Dr. Vorak let the weight of his words settle over the room. The implications of this are staggering, he said finally. They do not just survive the impossible, they reshape themselves to make the impossible survivable. Dr. Lek, the avian scientist, ruffled his feathers uneasily. Are you suggesting that given enough time, humans could adapt to anything? Dr. Vorak's optics gleamed. Not just adapt, he said. Thrive. The word sent a ripple through the assembled scientists. Thrive. Not merely endure, not simply persist, but conquer. Dr. Zephyr spoke up, her reptilian gaze sharp. Then we must ask ourselves one final question. The room turned to her. She gestured toward the display. We have seen that humans can survive injuries that should be fatal. We have seen that they can resist when logic dictates surrender. And now we see that they can adapt faster than any known species. Her golden eyes narrowed. So if humans can change to survive any environment, any condition, any enemy. She let the question hang in the air. Then she asked the only question left to ask. The unstoppable evolution of humanity. A heavy silence settled over the symposium hall after Dr. Zephyr's final question. It was no longer a debate of whether humans were exceptional. That much was undeniable. But now, the implications of their existence sent a ripple of uncertainty through the assembly. If humans could survive anything, if they could change themselves to fit any environment, if they could thrive even where death was certain, then what would happen when they set their sights beyond mere survival? What would happen when they sought domination? Dr. Vorak, his cybernetic eyes flickering with data streams, broke the silence. This symposium began as an exploration of human biology, he said, his voice a smooth mechanical hum. But we have stumbled upon something far greater. We are witnessing a species that does not just evolve. They evolve themselves. The other scientists exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from fascination to unease. I propose we study an even deeper question. Dr. Vorak continued. Not just why do humans survive, but how far can they go? With a flick of his metallic fingers, a new holographic display materialized in the air. This time, it was not a past case study. It was a prediction of the future. The first spaceborne humans. The image that appeared on the screen was unlike anything seen before, a depiction of humans, thousands of them, living permanently in space, their bodies transformed. Humans were not built for space, Dr. Vorak stated. Their bodies require gravity, oxygen, and protection from radiation. And yet, they are already overcoming these limitations. The display shifted, showing footage from Earth's early space programs. Astronauts in low orbit, floating in artificial habitats. Then, more recent footage, humans stationed in deep space for extended missions. But then, something remarkable appeared. Data streams showed physiological changes in long-term space travelers. Their bone density had decreased, but their cardiovascular systems had adapted. Their muscles had restructured. Their metabolisms had shifted. They do not merely survive in space, Dr. Vorak continued. They are becoming a species of spaceborne beings. The audience murmured in disbelief. Dr. Cavell, the aquatic scientist, narrowed her eyes. You are suggesting that given enough time, humans will evolve away from their own planet. Dr. Vorak nodded. Given enough time. Yes, but that is not the most concerning aspect. He changed the display again. This is not evolution over millennia. This is happening now. The augmented and the enhanced. A new set of holograms flickered to life, displaying something even more alarming: human augmentation. We have discussed their ability to change biologically, Dr. Vorak said. But humans do not limit themselves to natural evolution. They accelerate it through technology. The projection displayed enhanced soldiers, humans equipped with cybernetic limbs, neural implants, artificial organs. They replace what is broken. They modify what is inefficient. They enhance what is already strong. The room was utterly silent as the implications set in. Most species had evolved to their peak over millions of years. Their biological forms were static, locked within the limits of nature. But humans were rewriting their own biology. Dr. Leck, the avian scientist, ruffled his feathers nervously. This is not natural. Dr. Vorak turned to him. Precisely. They are no longer bound by nature's rules. He zoomed in on a case study. An enhanced human soldier, his limbs reinforced with cybernetics, his reflexes augmented with neural processors. This is no longer a mere biological species, Dr. Vorak said. This is the beginning of something else. The conquerors of the void. Dr. Zephyr, still watching in stunned silence, finally spoke. They are becoming something else. Dr. Vorak nodded. If they have already adapted to deep space, enhanced themselves beyond their natural limits, and rewritten their own evolution, he said, then there is only one question left. The audience turned toward him. Dr. Vorak's cybernetic eyes glowed. What will happen when they stop adapting and start conquering? A long silence followed. Dr. Cavell's voice was hesitant. You suggest they will wage war against the galaxy. Dr. Vorak was quiet for a moment. Then he said, not necessarily. He gestured, and the holographic display changed once more. It now showed Earth, surrounded by its growing spacefaring presence. Colonies, fleets, outposts in distant systems. They do not expand merely for conquest, he explained. They expand because they must. A new data stream scrolled across the display. Population statistics, resource depletion, planetary limitations. Dr. Zephyr narrowed her reptilian eyes. They are running out of room. Dr. Vorak nodded. Their world is finite. Their ambitions are not. The inevitability of expansion. A new projection appeared, one that sent chills through the gathered scientists. It was a future model of human expansion. Colony ships leaving Earth in waves, terraforming operations across barren planets, massive space stations serving as the foundations of a new civilization. They will not remain on Earth forever, Dr. Vorak said. They will spread, to survive, to grow, to become more. Dr. Luck swallowed. And if they encounter resistance, Dr. Zephyr answered before Dr. Vorak could. Then they will do what they have always done. She turned to the room. They will endure. She glanced back at the projection of a future where humanity had spread across the stars. They will adapt. Her golden eyes darkened. And they will thrive. The final question. The symposium hall was quiet. The scientists, many of whom had come simply to study an odd biological anomaly, now sat in the wake of an unsettling revelation. Humanity was not just another species. They were something else, something different, something new. And if their past was any indication of their future, then the galaxy had only one choice. Dr. Zephyr turned to the others. Do we embrace them or prepare for them? No one had an answer. Because for the first time in galactic history, a new force was rising, and it would not be stopped. The reckoning of the stars. A hushed tension settled over the symposium hall. The air was heavy with the weight of revelation. Dr. Zephyr's question, do we embrace them or prepare for them, lingered like a specter, hanging over the assembly of some of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. For centuries, the scientific community had dismissed humans as an anomaly, an oddity in the grand scheme of biology. Yet now, they were faced with a far more pressing realization. Humanity was not just surviving. They were changing. They were expanding. And they would not stop. The Silent Council. The xenobiologists and scholars were not the only ones listening. In a shadowed corner of the grand symposium chamber, representatives from powerful interstellar factions sat in silence. Hidden behind one-way holo-veil screens, they observed, listened, and calculated. The Zyrvan Dominion, an empire of advanced reptilian warlords, had long prided themselves as the galaxy's greatest warriors. Their high general sat stiffly, his scaled hands clasped together, his amber eyes flickering with unease. The Mechanine Collective, a cybernetic civilization that had achieved machine perfection, processed the data before them with cold, mechanical precision. Their synthetic overlords saw a new variable entering their calculations, one that could not be ignored. The Varric Ascendancy, an elder race of telepathic beings, felt something in the currents of the cosmos, a shift, an imbalance, a presence unlike anything they had encountered before, a presence that felt like an incoming storm. They had all underestimated humanity. Now, the question was not whether humans would rise. The question was what the galaxy would do about it. The fears of the old powers. Dr. Vorak, though a scientist, had spent enough time among the great factions of the galaxy to understand how they thought. The major powers will not sit idly by, he murmured, adjusting his cybernetic optics. This symposium is no longer just a discussion. It is a warning. Dr. Cable, her blue-green scales dimming with concern, turned toward him. Do you truly believe they will act? Vorak did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the gathered scholars, as well as the shadowed figures he knew were watching. This is the pattern of history, he said. Every time an unexpected force rises, the established rulers react. He gestured to the holographic projections still floating in the air, the visual models of human expansion, the augmentation of their bodies, the spread of their colonies. Some will see this as an opportunity to align with humanity, to understand them, to guide their growth. He paused. But others will see this as a threat. Dr. Zephyr folded her arms. If the great powers view humanity as a threat, they will attempt to contain them. Dr. Lek, still ruffled with nervous energy, shook his head. Contain them? That is impossible. Humanity cannot be contained. We have seen this. Vorak gave a grim nod. That is exactly the problem. The wars that never came. There had been many rising civilizations throughout galactic history. Some had burned brightly but briefly, falling before they could ever reach true power. Others had been absorbed by older, stronger factions. And some had been eliminated before they could pose a risk. The great empires of the galaxy had centuries of experience in maintaining control. If a young species showed signs of rapid expansion, they were either brought into the fold or extinguished before they could challenge the order of things. Dr. Cable's voice was quiet. Are we witnessing the beginning of another such attempt? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. If the great powers decided that humanity could not be allowed to rise unchecked, then war was inevitable. But unlike every other species before them, humanity had something different, something dangerous, something the galaxy had never encountered before. The breaking of chains. Dr. Vorak darkened the holograms, replacing them with a simple image, a single human standing on a battlefield, wounded but unyielding. They do not bow. His voice was almost reverent. They do not submit. They do not break. He glanced around the room. Every species in the galaxy has known fear. Every species has, at some point, chosen surrender over extinction. He let his gaze settle on the hidden council members, knowing they were listening. But humans do not surrender, even when they should. Another flick of his fingers. The image changed again, now showing archived footage of human resistance across different conflicts. The siege of Terra, where they had fought against impossible odds to defend their homeworld. The Martian uprising, where they had endured decades of hardship to break free from tyranny. The Void Rebellion, where prisoners had overthrown their own captors using nothing but scavenged tools and raw determination. Their adaptability is not just physical, Vorak continued. It is psychological. They do not believe in inevitability. They do not accept defeat. Dr. Zephyr exhaled slowly. That is why they are dangerous. Vorak nodded. And that is why any attempt to subjugate them will fail. He turned to the scholars. To fight humanity is to create the very thing you fear. It is to push them beyond their limits and force them to become even stronger. His cybernetic optics flickered as he delivered his final statement. They will never stop. The turning point. In the shadows, the council members absorbed the warning. Some remained unconvinced. Others were filled with doubt. But one thing was certain. Humanity had surpassed mere curiosity. They had become a question that needed answering. A choice lay before the great empires of the galaxy. They could attempt to contain humanity, to smother their potential before they became too powerful. Or they could join them. No species had ever been able to reshape themselves the way humanity could. If the elder civilizations allied with them, if they embraced the chaos of human willpower, then perhaps, for the first time in history, the galaxy could change. Dr. Vorak shut off the holograms. This symposium began with a question, he said. Why is human biology so ridiculous? He let the silence stretch before answering himself. Because they were never meant to stay as they are. He stepped back, glancing toward the vast stars visible through the symposium's skylights. They are meant to become something greater. And as the council members departed to deliver their reports to their respective factions, one undeniable truth settled over the gathered minds. The age of humanity had begun, and no force in the universe could stop it.